Beneath the golden radiance of the Erd tree lies a truth more terrible than any darkness that has ever touched the lands between. For millennia, that towering beacon has bathed the world in its divine light, its branches reaching toward heaven like the fingers of a benevolent god. Yet like all light, it casts shadows, and in those shadows lurks the most devastating revelation of all. The goddess who created this golden age was also engineering its destruction from the very beginning. Queen Marika the Eternal stands at the center of everything. She is the vessel of the Elden Ring, chosen by the Greater Will, mother of demigods, architect of the Golden Order. Her name is whispered in reverence throughout the realm. Her statues grace every church. Her grace flows through the very roots of existence. But strip away the golden veneer, peer beyond the propaganda of divinity, and you'll discover something far more complex than a benevolent deity. You'll find a woman who played the longest game in history, a shattered soul who transformed trauma into rebellion, a prisoner who spent centuries planning her escape. The Shaman Village, now empty and haunting, was the hometown of Queen Marika before her ascension to godhood. Picture, if you will, walking through this abandoned place hidden in the land of shadow. Sweeping hillscapes covered in vivid flowers eclipse an abandoned hamlet with an innocent, luminous sapling dipped in yellow at their center. The music here differs from anywhere else in these broken lands. Stringed instruments are gently plucked in relaxed rhythm, soft, somber, peaceful. This is where our story truly begins, not in golden glory, but in unspeakable tragedy. The secret of Marika's rebellion doesn't start with her godhood. It begins with a young woman from a persecuted people, watching her entire world burn before she ever wore a crown. To understand why a goddess would shatter the very source of her power, we must first understand what created her. We must descend into the depths of cruelty that forged a victim into a tyrant, a liberator into an oppressor, a mother into the architect of her children's suffering. This village was once populated by persecuted shamans before the age of the Erd tree. It was the home of Marika before her ascension to godhood. By the time Marika returned, her kinfolk had vanished. The word vanished here carries a weight heavier than mountains. They didn't simply disappear, they were taken, tortured, transformed into something unspeakable. The shamans were spirited away or kidnapped by the horn-sent, greater potentates of the Bani village. Many of the former residents were tortured and turned into jar dwellers. Let that sink in for a moment. Those cheerful jar warriors you encountered throughout your journey, those seemingly whimsical creatures, they are the remnants of Marika's people. The shamans had a unique ability to merge their bodies with other things. This merging ability was abused by the horn-sent people in a gruesome way. By exploring dungeons in Shadow of the Erd tree, players find what's inside the jars, giant, fleshy monsters that are shamans, grafted and combined with other things. Imagine returning home to find everyone you've ever known, gone, stolen away for barbaric rituals. Imagine learning that your people's unique gift, their ability to merge with other entities, had been weaponized against them, used to stuff them into jars in some twisted religious ceremony. This is the soil from which Marika's divinity grew. This is the foundation of her grand design. Marika's people were stolen away and stuffed in jars as part of a barbaric horn-sent ritual. The horn-sent worshipped the crucible and venerated those born with horns, tails, and other characteristics. Marika's persecution of the horn-sent, and later the omen and misbegotten, is cruel, but this knowledge helps understand where her hatred came from. The transformation from victim to goddess wasn't clean or simple. She was chosen by the Greater Will, a cosmic power that exerts influence over reality through emissaries like the Two Fingers. But here's where the narrative becomes fascinating. Evidence suggests this choice might not have been as divine as it appeared. Meta, Mother of Fingers, had limited contact with the Greater Will, only hearing its instructions occasionally. This is opposite of what residents believe, thinking the Two Fingers are in constant communication with the god. While Marika and the Fingers had some connection to the outer god, most of their actions were of their own desires, masking them as divine orders. Think about that revelation. The entire Golden Order, this supposedly perfect divine system, was built on a lie. The greater will had been absent, or at least silent, for far longer than anyone realized. The relationship between the fingers and the greater will was weak, since their main point of contact, Mita, Mother of Fingers, had lost communication with the will long ago. We don't know if this was something Marika knew, or if she even cared. Now we come to one of the most intriguing mysteries of Marika's nature, her dual existence with Radagon. Radagon later becomes the second Elden Lord and also merges with Marika. They are, in fact, the same being. This dual identity reflects the tension at the heart of the game's mythology. Marika seeks to rebel against the cosmic system, while Radagon appears devoted to repairing and maintaining it. This isn't merely a case of split personality or possession. This is something far more fundamental, two halves of the same soul pulling in opposite directions. The alchemical symbolism here runs deep. This concept represents the culmination of the alchemist's quest to achieve balance and perfection. The Red King and White Queen, masculine and feminine, order and chaos, all unified in one being. Yet this unity was anything but harmonious. While Marika sought to shatter, Radagon sought to repair. While she rebelled, he remained loyal. They were, in essence, their own greatest enemy. Consider the strategic brilliance of this duality. As Radagon, she could maintain the facade of loyalty to the Golden Order. She could father children with Renala, wage wars, spread the influence of the Erdtree, all while her other half plotted its downfall. Every action Radagon took in service to the greater will was simultaneously gathering intelligence for Marika's rebellion. Every victory for the Golden Order was another step toward its ultimate destruction. The early conquests tell a story of calculated preparation disguised as divine mandate. Marika waged war against the fire giants to quell their flame of ruin. During the war, the Zamor Knights helped the Golden Order, and the trolls betrayed the giants. At the end of the war, a fire giant remained, and it was cursed with overseeing the flame of ruin, as it can never be completely put out. But was this really about protecting the Erdtree? Or was Marika already planning for the day when that flame would be needed? Even her war against the fire giants becomes a major part of her plan to betray the Erdtree greater will. Killing its fire giants presumably makes it even easier for a Tarnished to access this flame. She eliminated the fire giants' strength while ensuring their flame, the one thing capable of burning the Erdtree, remained accessible. It's the kind of long-term planning that spans centuries, the patience of a goddess playing chess while everyone else plays checkers. The genocide of the Horn Scent reveals the depth of Marika's transformation from victim to perpetrator. She sent her own son, Messmer the Impaler, to wage a war of extermination against those who had destroyed her people. Messmer is stuck in the Land of Shadow, sent there on a mission to eliminate the rest of Marika's enemies and former oppressors. Marika is seemingly the only surviving shaman, as items found in her village state that no one else remains. Yet even in her vengeance we see the cracks in her divine facade. Marika's brutal conquests left her with enemies who would do anything to harm her, including Horn-Scent Grandam, a survivor who cursed Marika's bloodline. The Horn-Scent Grandam exclaims that Marika's children will all be struck by the curse of the omen. This could potentially explain Mog and Morgoth's omen status, Messmer's affliction, and Miquella's curse, though the exact connection remains debated among lore scholars. Marika surrendered her cursed children to different fates. Messmer forgotten in the realm of shadow, Mog and Morgoth abandoned in the sewers. The irony cuts deep. In her quest for vengeance against those who persecuted her for being different, she became a persecutor of difference herself. Her own children, born with the characteristics the Horn-Scent venerated, were cast aside, hidden away, treated as shameful secrets. The cycle of trauma perpetuated itself through divine hands. One of the most crucial yet mysterious elements of Marika's early reign involves the Gloam-Eyed Queen and the Rune of Death. Marika would remove the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring to establish her Age of Gold. This rune was in the possession of an Empyrean named the Gloam-Eyed Queen, who many theorize may have been connected to a previous age, though her exact role remains shrouded in mystery. The gloam-eyed queen was a powerful Empyrean that held the rune of Destined Death. All we know for certain is that Malekith defeated her, becoming the protector of the rune. This removal of Destined Death from the Elden Ring wasn't just about creating immortality for her children, it was about control. By removing natural death from the world, Marika created a system where she alone determined who lived and who died. She became not just a goddess, but the arbiter of mortality itself. Yet many theorized this was also the first deliberate weakening of the Elden Ring, the first crack in the foundation she would eventually shatter completely. The Golden Order, in essence, is the greater will's dictate for how the world works. And yet Marika had already removed the Rune of Death, implying she questioned the Golden Order all along, removing the rune as part of her plan. Every modification she made to the Elden Ring, every alteration to the natural order, was sold as divine improvement while secretly destabilizing the entire system. Now we arrive at perhaps the most controversial and devastating event before the Shattering itself, the Night of Black Knives. The Night of Black Knives was an event that would serve as the catalyst of the conflict known as the Shattering. It involved the assassination of Godwyn the Golden, the son of Queen Marika the Eternal. Although the conspirators remained unknown to the wider world, it was orchestrated by Lunar Princess Ranni. But was Ranni truly acting alone? The evidence suggests something far more sinister. The Black Knife. Assassins are a group of women who are said to be Numen with close connections to Queen Marika. The assassins were all women, and rumored to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself. The Numen connection is crucial here. Marika herself is Numen, making these assassins her own people, possibly the last survivors of her village's destruction. It is speculated that she had a hand in the Night of the Black Knives due to her rumored connection with the Black Knife assassins. Think about the implications. A mother potentially orchestrating the death of her most beloved son, her golden child who represented everything pure about her reign. It seems monstrous, unthinkable. Yet when viewed through the lens of her grand design, it becomes almost logical in its cold calculation. The greater will punishes her for the Shattering, brought on by grief at the loss of her son. But what if the grief was real, and the plan was calculated? What if Marika knew that only something as devastating as Godwyn's death could provide both the emotional and political catalyst needed to justify shattering the Elden Ring? This interpretation suggests she needed a reason that would seem natural, driven by maternal anguish rather than calculated rebellion. Godwyn's death provided that perfect cover. Tiche was one of the assassins who, on the night of the plot, imbued her black knife with the rune of death and slew Godwyn the Golden. Immediately following the assassination, the Black Knives fled the capital. Tiche, daughter of the Black Knife ringleader Electo, died protecting her mother during the escape. The assassins used fragments of the very rune of death that Marika had removed from the Elden Ring, wielded by women of her own race. The poetry of it is almost too perfect to be coincidence. Godwyn's murder was unique in that it killed his soul rather than his body, leaving his corporeal form to slowly rot. His death shook the foundation of divine rule and symbolized the first true death of a demigod. With Godwyn's death, the immortality of the gods was questioned, exposing vulnerability previously unimaginable. This wasn't just an assassination, it was a theological earthquake that shattered the illusion of divine invincibility. The aftermath of Godwyn's death reveals the true genius of Marika's potential involvement. Following the Night of Black Knives, the Elden Ring was shattered by Queen Marika. The timing seems too perfect. The death of her golden son providing the emotional justification for an act that would otherwise seem like pure betrayal. The greater will and its servants could understand a mother's grief, driving her to madness. They couldn't comprehend that the madness might have been the point all along. The death of her son sent Marika off the deep end. The events of that night directly caused Marika to shatter the Elden Rune. Or did they merely provide the excuse she had been waiting centuries to use? The act of shattering itself was violent, apocalyptic, world-ending and world-beginning simultaneously. Their final act is to be bound within the Erd Tree as its hallowed center. Marika's body is shattered and suspended, a symbolic image of divine punishment and fragmentation. The Elden Beast crucified Marika upon a giant rune arc and imprisoned her within the Erd Tree after she shattered the Elden Ring. But even in her imprisonment, even in her shattering, Marika's plan continued to unfold. Because the shattering wasn't the end of her scheme, it was merely the beginning of its final phase. Marika's offspring, demigods all, claimed the shards known as the Great Runes, and the mad taint triggered a war, the Shattering, a war that meant abandonment by the greater will. And now the guidance of grace will be brought to the Tarnished, who were spurned and exiled. Here we see the true brilliance of Marika's foresight. When she banished Godfrey and his men, she said they would be summoned back after their deaths. This summoning of the Tarnished is when the game starts, sending both Godfrey and all Tarnished toward the Elden Ring. She hadn't just banished them, she had seeded them throughout the world, creating a diaspora of warriors who would one day return when the Greater Will's influence was at its weakest. The Tarnished were never truly exiled. They were deployed. They were sleeper agents in a war that wouldn't begin for generations. Gideon learned of Marika's true goal. Morgott, even though born an omen, remained loyal to Marika as he called other demigods willful traitors and calls himself the last of all kings, implying he knows there will be no king after him. The evidence suggests Marika's long game appears everywhere once you know where to look. Every conquest, every alliance, every child born and abandoned, all of it serving dual purposes. On the surface, expanding the Golden Order's dominion. Beneath, weakening its foundations, creating cracks that would one day split wide open. Consider her treatment of her cursed children. Godwyn, Morgott, and Mohg were her children with Godfrey. While Godwyn was well regarded, the twins Morgott and Mohg were born with horns similar to the Hornsent, so Marika treated them as unworthy, banishing them underground. Yet Morgott, despite everything, remained loyal to the very end. Did he understand his mother's true purpose? Did he see past the cruelty to the necessity beneath? The relationship with her children reveals the terrible price of Marika's rebellion. She created life knowing it would suffer. She bore demigods understanding they would war against each other. She loved them, perhaps, but she loved freedom more. Or perhaps she believed that only through their suffering could true freedom be achieved, not just for herself, but for all existence. When shadowy blades stole her golden son's soul on that fateful night, Marika's grief turned to rebellion. With one terrible act, she shattered the Elden Ring, the very foundation of her world, plunging the lands between into war and ruin. But the grief and the rebellion weren't separate events. They were two faces of the same coin, tragedy and triumph intertwined in a moment that had been centuries in the making. The revelation about the Greater Will's absence adds another layer to this complex narrative. The Greater Will may have been using threats to control Marika. There's little to suggest the Greater Will was issuing orders to Marika, let alone whether hypothetical orders were forcing her into evil or restraining her from being worse. This raises the question, was Marika rebelling against an absent god? Was she fighting shadows and echoes, destroying the system that had already effectively abandoned the world? This possibility makes her rebellion even more tragic. She might have spent millennia planning to overthrow a tyrant that had already left the building. The Golden Order she worked so hard to destroy might have been running on autopilot, sustained by momentum and belief rather than divine will. Yet perhaps that made its destruction even more necessary. A system without oversight is even more dangerous than one with a cruel master. Perhaps the most logical explanation is that she never wanted to be this goddess. Most of this is a falsehood. She was an Empyrean, bound to a god, and just as Ranni destroyed her flesh to escape this fate, Marika could have been looking to escape this fate. The parallel with Ranni is particularly striking. Both sought freedom from the Greater Will's control, but while Ranni escaped through death of the flesh, Marika sought escape through the shattering of the very system that bound her. The evidence suggests that Marika's rebellion wasn't a sudden decision born of grief, but a methodical plan executed across centuries. Every major event of her reign can be recontextualized as preparation for the final act. The removal of Destined Death created the conditions for the Night of Black Knives. The conquest of the fire giants preserved the one weapon that could burn the Erd Tree. The banishment of the Tarnished created an army that would return when needed most. As centuries went by, Marika felt more imprisoned by her duty as a goddess. She was inside the Erd Tree most of the time, in charge of the Elden Ring. Marika wanted to be free from her duty, so she tried to shatter the Elden Ring. The word duty here carries the weight of cosmic chains. She was not just a ruler, but a prisoner. Not just a goddess, but a slave to forces beyond her control. Yet even in her imprisonment within the shattered remains of her body, crucified within the Erd Tree, Marika's plan continues. The Tarnished rise. The demigods fall. The old order crumbles while something new struggles to be born. Every ending the player can choose represents a different interpretation of Marika's ultimate goal: restoration, transformation, or complete annihilation. Queen Marika is a study in paradox. Divine yet fallible, creator and destroyer. Her story forces players to question the nature of order, faith, and freedom. In a world where gods are tools of distant powers, Marika is one who tries to act on her will, and the scars of her rebellion stretch across the lands between. The tragedy of Marika isn't just that she suffered, or that she caused suffering in return. It's that she understood the cycle she was perpetuating and chose to continue anyway. She knew that breaking the Golden Order would mean chaos, war, and death on an unprecedented scale. She knew her children would tear each other apart fighting over the remnants of her shattered divinity. She knew the lands between would burn, and she did it anyway. Because the alternative, eternal servitude to an absent God, endless perpetuation of a system built on lies and suffering, was worse. Marika chose chaos over chains, destruction over degradation, the possibility of change over the certainty of stagnation. She chose to be the villain in her own story if it meant others could someday write their own. Some might see her as a monster who sacrificed her own children on the altar of her ambition. Others might view her as the ultimate freedom fighter, willing to destroy everything she built to break the cosmic chains that bound not just her, but all existence. The truth, as always in these matters, likely lies somewhere between these extremes. What we can say with certainty is that Marika's rebellion was neither sudden nor simple. It was the culmination of centuries of planning, preparation, and patience. Every victory she achieved for the greater will was also a step toward its downfall. Every child she bore was both a hostage to fortune and a weapon in her arsenal. Every law she established contained within it the seeds of its own destruction. The Shaman Village stands as a monument to the beginning of this tale, a peaceful place transformed by violence into the birthplace of divinity and rebellion. Shaman Village casts a new light on the game's central figure and asks us to rethink our opinions of her, to readjust our understanding of the world. When you stand in that flower-strewn hamlet, listening to those gentle notes that echo through the centuries, you're standing at the genesis point of everything: love and hate, creation and destruction, order and chaos. Marika's plan wasn't just to break free from the greater will. It was to break the very concept of divine control, to shatter the idea that any being should have absolute power over others. She became the god in order to kill the position of God itself. She accepted worship to prove that the worshipped were unworthy of it. She created a golden age to demonstrate that all such ages must end. The brilliance of her scheme lies not just in its scope, but in its inevitability. By removing death, she made the world stagnant. By creating demigods, she ensured succession wars. By establishing absolute order, she guaranteed rebellion. Every strength of the Golden Order contained within it a fatal weakness that Marika had deliberately built into the system. She was simultaneously the architect and the saboteur, the creator and the destroyer. Consider the symbolic weight of the Erd Tree itself. She grafted the Erd tree onto the base of the ancient Great Tree, home to the crucible and symbol of a previous age. Even the very symbol of her divine rule was built upon something older, something she overwrote but couldn't entirely erase. The Erd tree, for all its golden glory, was itself a parasitic growth feeding on the remnants of what came before. How fitting that Marika, who understood the parasitic nature of divine rule better than anyone, would choose such a symbol for her reign. The question that haunts every examination of Marika's rebellion is whether the cost was worth it. The Shattering led to countless deaths, immeasurable suffering, the complete breakdown of civilization. The demigods, her own children, were driven mad by power and tore each other apart. The lands between became a nightmare realm of endless conflict and decay. Was freedom from the greater will worth this price? Marika seemed to believe it was, or perhaps she believed that the question itself was irrelevant, that the cost would be paid regardless, either in one explosive moment of rebellion or in countless eons of grinding servitude. She chose the explosion, the shattering, the chaos. She chose to compress infinite future suffering into one finite period of absolute destruction. The ambiguity in Marika's character is shown by conflicting reports. Gideon states, Marika's goals involve forcing Tarnished to fight a forever war, while Hugh claims the Tarnished slaying the Elden Beast and becoming Elden Lord is Marika's will. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps Marika wanted the Tarnished to wage eternal war against the very concept of divine order, and the only way to truly win that war was to destroy its ultimate embodiment, the Elden Beast itself. The relationship between Marika and Radagon becomes even more poignant when viewed through this lens. They weren't just two personalities in conflict, they were the embodiment of the fundamental contradiction at the heart of existence. Order and chaos, creation and destruction, loyalty and rebellion, all unified in one shattered being. Consumed by grief and defiance, Marika destroys the Elden Ring. Radagon attempts to repair it, but is punished, merging with the Elden Beast. In the end, Radagon's loyalty to the Golden Order led to his fusion with the very entity Marika sought to destroy. He became one with the Elden Beast, the ultimate expression of the greater will's power, while Marika remained imprisoned within, conscious but powerless, watching as her other half became everything she fought against. The irony is exquisite in its cruelty. Yet even this might have been part of her plan. By forcing the Tarnished to fight through Radagon to reach the Elden Beast, she ensured that whoever claimed victory would have to literally destroy the part of herself that remained loyal to the old order. The final battle isn't just against a god, it's against the very concept of unquestioning servitude that Radagon represents. The thematic parallels between Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring and Gwyn's sacrifice in Dark Souls present an interesting reversal. Where Gwyn prolonged an age that should have ended, many interpret Marika's actions as choosing to end an age that seemed eternal. The Elden Beast became the Elden Ring, and Marika became the ring's vessel. This suggests she chose transformation over preservation, chaos over order, the unknown future over the known present. She chose transformation over preservation, chaos over order, the unknown future over the known present. The legacy of Marika's rebellion extends beyond the immediate chaos of the Shattering. She fundamentally changed the relationship between mortals and gods, between the ruled and their rulers. By proving that even gods could rebel against their nature, that even divine order could be shattered, she opened the door to possibilities that had never before existed in the lands between. Every ending available to the player represents a different interpretation of Marika's vision. The Age of Fracture maintains the status quo with minor repairs. The Age of Stars, championed by Ranni, removes divine influence entirely. The Age of the Frenzied Flame burns everything to ash and starts anew. Each path honors a different aspect of Marika's rebellion, her desire for freedom, her will to destroy oppression, or her recognition that sometimes only complete annihilation can bring true change. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Marika's plan is that it doesn't prescribe a specific outcome. She didn't rebel against the greater will to install herself as the new absolute power. She shattered the Elden Ring not to reforge it in her image, but to create the possibility for something genuinely new to emerge. Her rebellion was an act of cosmic anarchism, destroying the old order without dictating what should replace it. This is why the Tarnished, not Marika herself, must make the final choice. She created the conditions for change but refused to dictate its direction. Having spent eons as a divine dictator, she understood better than anyone the corruption that comes with absolute power. Her final act wasn't to seize control, but to distribute it, to take the power of godhood and scatter it to the winds like seeds, letting them fall where they may. There's something about the events, the pawns moving about, the endings and what they mean. It seems like a game being masterfully played over millennia by a ruthless and cunning being, seeking to be rid of the greater will's control. Every piece on this cosmic chessboard was placed with intention, every move calculated generations in advance. Yet the final move wasn't Marika's to make. She set up the board, defined the rules, and then shattered both, leaving others to play out the endgame. The revelation of the Shaman Village and Marika's origins recontextualizes everything we thought we knew about the Golden Order, the Erdtree, and divinity itself. She wasn't a chosen one elevated by divine grace. She was a survivor who clawed her way to godhood through blood and suffering, who accepted the poisoned chalice of divinity knowing she would one day dash it to pieces. Understanding Marika's plan requires holding multiple contradictions simultaneously. She was victim and victimizer, liberator and tyrant, creator and destroyer. She loved her children and condemned them to suffering. She built the greatest civilization the lands between had ever seen and deliberately engineered its collapse. She was, in every sense, the architect of both paradise and apocalypse. The Tarnished who finally stands before her shattered form in the Erdtree isn't just confronting a broken goddess. They're facing the culmination of the longest, most complex rebellion in history. Every step of their journey was anticipated. Every challenge they faced was deliberately placed. They are the final instrument of Marika's will, whether they know it or not, chosen not by grace, but by careful design to complete what she started so long ago. In the end, the truth behind Marika's rebellion isn't a simple revelation, but a cascade of interconnected realizations, each more devastating than the last. She didn't just rebel against the greater will, she rebelled against the very concept of divine authority. She didn't just shatter the Elden Ring, she shattered the foundational myths that held the world together. She didn't just free herself, she forced everyone in the lands between to confront their own freedom, terrible and beautiful in equal measure. The golden light of the Erdtree still bathes the lands between, but now we see it for what it truly is, not the benevolent radiance of divine order, but the dying light of a goddess's grand gambit, a light kindled in trauma and rebellion, sustained by suffering and determination, and finally shattered in an act of liberation that destroyed both prison and prisoner alike. Marika's plan, in its ultimate expression, was to make gods mortal and mortals free. Whether she succeeded or merely exchanged one form of tyranny for another depends entirely on what rises from the ashes of her rebellion. The shattering wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of countless possible stories, each one a different answer to the question she posed through her destruction. What comes after the gods? The answer, like Marika herself, remains suspended in that moment between shattering and reformation, between ending and beginning, between the last breath of the old world and the first breath of whatever comes next. Her rebellion complete, her body broken, her will finally free, or perhaps imprisoned forever in the very act of liberation she orchestrated. The paradox of Marika is the paradox of revolution itself. To change everything, one must destroy everything, including, ultimately, oneself. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the complex web of Marika's rebellion and the hidden truths of Elden Ring's lore, please like and subscribe to Keen Lore for more comprehensive explorations of gaming's most fascinating stories and mysteries.